The Battle of the Frontiers was a series of battles fought along the eastern frontier of France and in southern Belgium shortly after the outbreak of World War I. The battles represented a collision between the military strategies of the French Plan XVII and the German Schlieffen Plan. The German idea, to concentrate their forces on their right flank and wheel through Belgium to attack the French in the rear, was foiled by the movement of General Charles Lanrezac's Fifth Army towards the northwest to intercept them in the presence of the British Expeditionary Force on his left flank. Although driven back by the weight of three German armies, the French and British rearguard actions delayed the German advance, allowing the French time to transfer their forces to the west to defend Paris, resulting in the First Battle of the Marne. Prelude. The objective of the French Plan XVII was to recapture the provinces of Alsace-Lorraine, lost in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, pinning the German forces on the Rhine, and to attack the German center through the southern Ardennes. In opposition to Plan XVII, the German Schlieffen Plan anticipated the target of the French assault and determined to remain there on the defensive, holding the Alsace-Lorraine front with the minimal possible force needed to keep the bulk of the French engaged there. The main German force would be on the right wing, sweeping through neutral Belgium and then into France, descending on Paris and executing a massive envelopment maneuver which would trap the French army between the two German forces and lead to its rapid annihilation. The German divisions would then rapidly turn about to face France's ally, Russia, on the Eastern Front. The German plan mistakenly assumed Britain, not formally allied with either side, would remain neutral in the conflict, and deemed the relatively small British regular army too small to be of any impact even if it did get involved. France's frontier defenses were based on a fortified zone from Verdun to Toul and isolated fortresses such as Epinal and Belfort. To the north, France relied on the impassable terrain of the central Ardennes forest and the promise of Belgian neutrality. Thus Plan XVII called for a two-pronged offensive, north and south of the Verdun-Toul line. In the south, the 1st and 2nd Armies would attack into Lorraine. In the north the 3rd, 4th and 5th Armies would attack through the southern Ardennes towards Luxembourg. On the left flank of the 5th Army, facing the Belgian frontier, was the BIF, which concentrated near the fortress town of Maubeuge. On the French frontier, the German forces roughly matched the French in numbers and disposition, even to the point of being divided north and south of a fortified zone between Metz and Thionville. However, in Belgium to the north, opposing the French 5th Army and BIF, were the German 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Armies, forming the mass of Schlieffen's right wing. Germany invaded Belgium on August 4, 1914 and began to besiege Liège. Despite evidence of German forces massing east of the city, General Joseph Joffre, the French commander-in-chief, dismissed the threat to his northern flank and persisted with Plan XVII. Indeed, Joffre welcomed the prospect of a strong German right, which would mean the German left wing against which his offensives were directed would be weaker. In 1913, General Noël de Castelnau, then Deputy Chief of the French General Staff, declared a German attack through Flanders was so much the better for us, and that opinion still prevailed amongst the French High Command. Even as the German armies began flowing through Belgium in mid-August, Joffre's Assistant Chief of Staff, General Henri Berthelot said, "If the Germans commit the imprudence of an enveloping maneuver through northern Belgium, so much the better. The more men they have on their right wing, the easier it will be for us to break through their center." Alsace and Lorraine. The first French attack of the war, known as the Battle of Mulhouse, was fought on 7th of August. It began in the south when the French 7th Corps, along with 2 infantry and 1 cavalry division, advanced into southern Alsace with the objective of seizing the towns of Mulhouse and Colmar. Mulhouse was taken without a fight on 8th of August, causing enormous celebrations in France. However, a German counterattack commenced on 9th of August, forcing the French to begin a slow withdrawal which was finished the next day. Joffre sent a division to reinforce the attacking force, but it arrived too late to prevent the fall of Mulhouse. In response to the repulse of 7 Corps and the other divisions, Joffre sent 4 additional divisions to form the Army of Alsace under the command of retired General Paul Pau. The main French offensive in the south, known as the Battle of Lorraine, began on 14th of August when the 1st Army of General Auguste Dubé advanced on Cereberg while the 2nd Army of General de Castelnau headed towards Morange. The French moves were welcomed by the German 6th and 7th Armies under the combined command of Crown Prince Ruprecht of Bavaria. Ruprecht was in charge of the German forces assigned to meet and engage the French assault in the center until they could be enveloped by the encircling German right wing. The German rear guards, equipped with machine guns, inflicted heavy casualties on the French infantry, still wearing their 19th-century-style uniform of blue coat and red trousers. Crown Prince Ruprecht, dissatisfied with the defensive role assigned to him, petitioned his superiors to allow him a counteroffensive. This ran against the overall German plan of luring the French in, but on Ruprecht's repeated insistence the policy of defense in the center was abandoned and a counteroffensive launched on 20th of August against the French Second Army, which was thrown back into France. This left the French First Army's flank in the air, forcing it to withdraw as well. Pau's army of Alsace also had to pull back, despite having retaken Mulhouse. By 22nd of August, the French forces were back on their start lines along the Moselle River. The Schlieffen Plan, here and elsewhere on the front, now began to unravel as Crown Prince Ruprecht launched a full-scale offensive between Toul and Epinal, starting on 23rd of August. However, the French forces were now occupying prepared defenses and withstood the German attack, which lasted for 4 days. German forces locked into Ruprecht's offensive were therefore unavailable for the later fighting on the Marne when they may have proved decisive. Ardennes Offensive. Under Plan 17, the French offensive against the German center through the lower Ardennes was to involve the 3rd, 4th and 5th French armies, but by the time the offensive was due to start, Plan 17 was beginning to crumble. General Charles Lanrezac, commander of the northernmost 5th Army, alarmed by German progress in Belgium, sought permission to realign his forces away from the Ardennes and towards Belgium, shifting west into the angle between the Sambre and Meuse rivers. Joffre remained dismissive of the threat, but on 12th of August he allowed Lanrezac to move I Corps west to Dinant on the Meuse. When on 15th of August Lanrezac reported German forces attacking Dinant, Joffre finally acquiesced, ordering the bulk of the 5th Army to move northwest and take up positions behind the Sambre. In addition to the loss of most of the 5th Army from the Ardennes offensive, Joffre also withdrew divisions to reinforce the Lorraine front following Ruprecht's counteroffensive. The Battle of the Ardennes commenced on 21st of August with the attack of General Pierre Ruffy's 3rd Army towards Briey while the 4th Army of General Fernand de Langle de Carry advanced on Neufchâteau. The German 4th Army and 5th Army had been making a methodical advance through the Ardennes since 19 August, and on 21st of August, the advance screens of the two forces collided in a confused series of skirmishes. The main forces came into contact on 22nd of August, and in most cases the French infantry, attacking with a surplus of élan but a shortage of supporting artillery, were defeated by superior German tactics, particularly in their use of entrenchments, machine guns and heavy artillery. There were isolated French successes, notably at Virton by the Vi Corps, but, by the evening of 23rd of August the French 3rd and 4th Armies were in chaotic retreat, falling back on the line of the Moselle through Sedan, Stenay, and Verdun. Charleroi and Mons. By 20th of August, Lanrezac's 5th Army had begun to concentrate on a 40 km front along the Sambre, centered on Charleroi and extending east to the Belgian fortress of Namur. On his left, the cavalry corps of General Sordet linked the 5th Army with the BIF at Mons. Lanrezac's army of 15 divisions, weakened by the transfer of troops to Lorraine, was confronted by the 38 German divisions from the 2nd and 3rd Armies moving southwest. Nevertheless, Joffre ordered Lanrezac to attack across the Sambre. Before he could act on the morning of 21st of August, the German Second Army launched the Battle of Charleroi with assaults across the Sambre, establishing two bridgeheads which the French, lacking artillery, were unable to reduce. Bülow attacked again on 22nd of August with 3 corps against the entire 5th Army front. Fighting continued on 23rd of August when the French center around Charleroi began to fall back. Meanwhile the German 3rd Army had crossed the Meuse and launched a frontal attack against the French right, held by a corps commanded by General Louis Franchet d'Esperey. The 3rd Army attack threatened to cut off Lanrezac's line of retreat, but d'Esperey's force stopped the German advance and delivered a successful counterattack. However, with the evacuation of Namur and news of the French 4th Army retreating from the Ardennes, Lanrezac ordered a withdrawal. On 22nd of August, BIF patrols encountered the cavalry screen of the German 1st Army of General Alexander von Kluck near Soignies southwest of Brussels. The British Commander-in-Chief, Field Marshal Sir John French, initially ordered an attack, believing he was confronted by an inferior force. In truth the BIF of 4 infantry and 1 cavalry division, 80,000 men, faced over 160,000 German troops, the mass of Schlieffen's right wing. Fortunately for the British, French chose to take up defensive positions along the Mons-Condé Canal, on the night of 22nd of August. The Battle of Mons began on 23rd of August when von Kluck, required to maintain contact with Bülow's Second Army on his left, launched a frontal attack on the British line with the main weight falling on the British II Corps of General Horace Smith-Dorrien. The massed rifle fire of the professional British soldiers, the Old Contemptibles, inflicted heavy casualties on the Germans who attacked en masse over terrain devoid of cover. The British held up the German advance until the evening when, now aware of the size of the opposing force, and with Sourdet's cavalry in retreat leaving the right flank exposed, they began retiring to a second defensive line. For the moment, von Kluck made no attempt at pursuit, allowing the BIF to disengage on 24th of August. Aftermath. With the failure of Plan 17, the French and British armies began the Great Retreat to the Marne River, pivoting on the fortress of Verdun. Fearing annihilation, French favored withdrawing the BIF behind the Seine to refit, but the British Secretary of State for War, Lord Kitchener, despite having never favored the BIF's role alongside the French army, now insisted they remain in contact. The Schlieffen Plan, while still on course, was beginning to come to pieces under the tentative control of Moltke. The opening of the Russian offensive in East Prussia and the unforeseen attack in Lorraine had drained the German right wing that was descending on Paris. Von Kluck's decision to take his first army east of the French capital exposed his right flank, which the Allies exploited in the First Battle of the Marne in early September, halting the German advance. For the French, their hope of a swift, decisive victory had evaporated and they now sought to avoid defeat. For Joffre, the reason for the failure of Plan 17 lay with his subordinates, claiming defeat stemmed from grave shortcomings on the part of commanders. Any generals, of corps or division, who in Joffre's opinion had failed to perform, were ruthlessly sacked. Despite the wisdom of his decision to retreat instead of counterattacking on 23rd of August, General Lanrezac was sent into retirement and replaced by Franchet d'Esperey, starting his rapid rise through the ranks. By the end of August, the French army had suffered 75,000 dead, of which 27,000 were killed on 22nd of August alone, making it a day to rival the first day on the Somme for bloodshed. Total French casualties for the first month of the war were 260,000, of which 140,000 were sustained during the climactic final 4 days of the Battle of the Frontiers.